Hey lady, welcome to the Grit, Growth, Grace podcast. If we haven't met, my name is Anne Marie. I'm wife to James and mom to 4 beautiful kids, plus 1 miscarried baby, from 9 months up to 8 years. My hope is to help other women experience the postpartum period all the way up to the first year of baby's life as a time of grit, growth, and grace. This is episode 26. Hey lady, it's your baby's first Advent and Christmas. Hooray! I hope you have all the baby's first Christmas stuff to your heart's content. Footy pajamas, ornaments, stocking. Let's talk today about how to approach what one popular song calls the most wonderful time of the year, when you are sleep deprived and hormonal. From the get-go, I'll tell you what I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you a timeline for putting up decorations, baking cookies, etc., kind of like the holiday version of a timeline for brides. Nor am I going to tell you to just say no to everything. There's always next Christmas. I'm not going to try to sell you a product or get you to buy something that's going to solve all your problems. You can't buy sleep on Amazon anyway. Here are the 2 key ideas I do encourage you to embrace as you enter into Advent and then the Christmas season. They are gentleness and responsibility. I think of it as a sandwich, starting and ending with gentleness, both towards yourself and towards others. What does it mean to start with gentleness towards yourself relative to a new baby in Advent or Christmas? It means recognizing that you are in a season of life right now that is short, relatively speaking, and also very intense. As a result, some things are going to seem like a bigger deal to you than they would if you had more sleep, your hormones were more stable, you were back in a consistent routine, etc. Some conversations will hit you harder or be easier for you to interpret in a negative way. Things that someone else said or didn't say, did or didn't do, will be easier for you to ruminate on and mull over repeatedly without resolution. And this may all be magnified because it's Christmas and we want everything to be good and wonderful and even magical. Magical! Perhaps even while we are still very unmagically bleeding from childbirth. There's a grittiness to Christmas, to the Christmas story, that's easy to forget when we're drowning in sparkly, glittery ads and sales on matching Christmas pajamas. No, I'm not going Grinch over Christmas. I love sparkly, glittery things too. I'm only pointing out that when we have high expectations surrounding an event or events or an entire season, we can feel doubly disappointed with ourselves and others when humanity gets in the way, be it in the form of diaper blowouts, something rude someone said, the baby being colicky, running short on sleep, mastitis, older kids acting out, the list goes on. But you and I can know all that and plan to react differently, and then something happens and we forget our good intentions. When we recognize, and to the extent that we recognize, we're maybe overreacting to something, it's possible to respond with, nuts, did it again, and move on with the day without making it mean anything about you or I as a person. That is what leading with gentleness towards ourselves looks like. Now, for the gentleness with other people. During Advent or Christmas, some of the folks you rely on, be they family or friends, may be less available to help due to their own commitments. Or maybe somebody's insensitive and forgets that you had a baby not too long ago and wants you to host or help them with a bunch of things, just as if you had no new baby at all. Gentleness with them might look like assuming the best motives or intentions and then communicating, as calmly as you can, what is possible for you to help with versus what's not possible right now with a new baby. Communicating calmly is a beautiful segue into the responsibility piece, the meat of the sandwich. Taking responsibility for what is ours to take responsibility for without trying to control what is within someone else's locus of control, what they're responsible for, is a marvelous, marvelous thing, especially with a new baby in the house, and particularly at this time of year. But what does it mean to take responsibility for just the things I'm responsible for? It means that I know who and what I am responsible for, what is on my side of the road or in my yard. I'm responsible for my actions and also for the safety and well-being of my children. I am not responsible for the feelings, or actions of others. This means that I have to accept that someone else may not agree with or understand why I'm not able to commit to X or Y or Z, or, on the other hand, they may not agree with how and where I do choose to spend my time and energy. I'm a big girl, just like you, and we can both choose to live with someone else's lack of understanding or disagreement, even though it may feel very uncomfortable, and we may not always feel confident in our decisions. You and I are not responsible for making someone else feel a certain way, or for trying to tell them how or how not to feel. Nor are we responsible for making perfect choices. It may happen, to me, not to you of course, that I realize I overdid it by going to that Christmas party, or even that Advent retreat or day of recollection. Yes, sometimes we overdo it even with spiritual activities or devotions. Or maybe my husband points out to me that a comment I made came out differently, and by differently I mean worse, than I meant it to. When this happens, wash, rinse, repeat. I return to gentleness once again. That was too much. Well, tomorrow is a new day, if it was an overcommitment. Maybe it means texting or quickly calling a friend and saying, a la Charles Bingley in the 2005 version of the Pride and Prejudice movie, "First, I must tell you I've been the most unmitigated and comprehensive ass," or something casual like that. What else am I responsible for? My children's safety and well-being. They should be clothed and fed and prayed with every day. I get to decide on a daily basis if that suits my personality best, and more in advance if that suits my personality best, the extent of our Advent and Christmas devotions, activities, decorations, making of special foods, going to get pictures taken with Santa, homemade versus store-bought presents, toy shopping, and so on. And I do mean and so on, because the number of decisions to be made around Advent or Christmas is, as you well understand, significant, even without a new baby. But there is a new baby. And after that baby and his or her older siblings, if they exist, are clothed and fed and prayed with, everything else is a matter of discretion. Perhaps you like to have one fun outing each week to look forward to during this season. Maybe that means you go to a party. Perhaps it means you go to a parade or a Christmas-themed story hour at the library, or caroling, etc. Or maybe it means that you go day by day and decide what you have time and energy for that day, leading to more impromptu get-togethers or adventures. Once you've covered the basics, food, clothing, prayer, everything else is for you to decide. Does that sound too heavy? Everything else is for you to decide? What if I said it another way? You are doing enough if you are doing those things. Beyond that, what else might you like to do? Rather than sifting through 1,000 things you might or might not want to do, I'm kind of picturing touching all of your clothing in the Marie Kondo process. Instead, could you streamline your decision-making process by just asking yourself what devotions, activities, special foods are truly important to you and or your family? I like to ask myself these couple of questions. 1. How do I want to prepare my heart for Christmas? This year, that looks like a 5-minute family Advent wreath devotional. And by the way, my oldest is 8, and this is the first year we are praying together every night with 4 candles and an imaginary wreath on our dining room table. And then for me, a little blue book from church every night, and a couple times a week, I'm reading a couple pages from a spiritual book. Question number 2. How do I want to prepare our home for Christmas? This year, the simplest thing was to get a Christmas tree the day before Advent started, and to decorate it and the house on the first Sunday of Advent. And because our oldest are now 8 and almost 7, they did all of the lights and the ornaments themselves. It was wonderful. Another year, we may stagger decorating throughout Advent, or shift it more towards Christmas so that we're really observing Advent as its own distinct, separate season. But as I start the second trimester of pregnancy, and my energy is only now just starting to come back, and having volunteered to organize Advent by candlelight for my parish this year, we decorated the house on the first Sunday. This year I also purposefully chose to let go of feelings of envy at the way my sister's house is decorated compared to my own. Hers is so tasteful and wintry, and there are touches all over the place without being overtly Christmassy. And I took note of dissatisfaction in my heart, as if the way my house looks and my family decorates was all wrong. Not just different, but all wrong. It's a very judgmental thought. But taking responsibility for my own responses to the thoughts that arise in my brain, I recognized I could choose to feel inferior and absurd and compare myself, or not. Her house looks lovely and refined, and I can appreciate that without making it mean anything about me, since changing my decor is not a possibility right now, and it's not even an actual desire of mine this year. Another part of preparing our home for Christmas has to do with changing up our Christmas Eve food tradition. For years, we've had hamburgers and mashed potatoes on Christmas Eve, because one year, when James and I were dating, I was working the night shift as a nurse in the ICU, and he made me supper before my shift, and that's what I had in my apartment for him to work with. We've had it every year since, and this year we decided to change things up. I don't know what foods or traditions your family might be used to that might need to look different this year with a new baby. Maybe it's possible for a Grandma Tribe member or members to keep the tradition essentially unchanged for your older kids, like by taking them to a parade or to get their picture taken with Santa or to go Christmas caroling. But if you need to change things up, whether just for this year or going forward permanently, good can come from that as well. Let's close by returning to gentleness. We can hear a lot about cutting ourselves slack and just giving ourselves permission, practicing self-care and setting boundaries. And it may be easy to either write that all off as nonsense or to lean hard into self-indulgence and selfishness. But you and I both know there are things and people we are truly responsible for. And the more we recognize what those things are and take ownership over, for instance, our feelings and our responses to those feelings, the more we can be authentically gentle with ourselves and others. Yes, I am responsible for how I respond to my feelings being hurt. And yet I often start, as St. Paul said in Romans chapter 7, by doing the things I do not want to do. So I will try again, unsurprised by the weakness I find in myself. And when I find weakness in others, I needn't be surprised by that either. I can acknowledge how it makes me feel and how it affects me or my family. And then I can choose my response. Perhaps I or we do need distance, or perhaps we choose to simply not make a big deal out of a comment or situation. In gentleness, you and I can navigate these things, even in this busy season and even with a new baby. And we persist in this gentleness because Christ first loved us. He calls us on to be better for our own sake, but he does not wait for us to be better before loving us. He loves us all the while. That's our model for gentleness, lady. Next week will be a surprise guest episode. I look forward to sharing it with you.